three-way title race now.
It's got to be the way Villa are charging at the moment. You have to put them up there. And I think if anyone kind of sleeps a bit on Aston Villa, could really get caught out.
I don't think now, having assessed them over a longer period of time, that they're even at their best yet. They're going to be a massive force. So I still think there's more to come from them.
At some point, I expect Villa to implode. But fair play to them. There's no sign of that happening. They're the one team in the minute, probably them and City. And I'd actually put Villa ahead of City in this. You don't want to be playing at this moment in time because they just keep winning. And they keep finding different ways to win.
Is the Salah slot truce real?
Well, I certainly don't think we've heard the end of the story. I described it on Saturday as an uneasy truce. And I still sense that if Liverpool get a decent offer from Saudi in the January transfer window, then maybe they'll consider it.
There was a lot of love there for Salah. There was a lot of love between him and the supporters that I think he really would have felt. I just think he'll come back and he'll have to fit back in. And it's not going to take much, is it, for him to get to a level where you're going to start him anyway because he's your best player.
Can someone tell me who Maresca's outburst at the weekend helps?
Probably nobody, but maybe Maresca in the eyes of the supporters. Long term, it's probably a fight that he can't win, but certainly short term, he's won the hearts of the Chelsea supporters because he's proving he's not a yes man.
They don't want a superstar manager, which is why they appointed Enzo Maresca in the first place. So if he's trying to win the hearts and minds of the Chelsea supporters, then that's going to fly in the face of the way that the club want to operate.
What is it within those 48 hours that's either been said or not said to Enzo Maresca that's made him have this outburst?
This could be Enzo Maresca getting his ducks in a row ready for January, but I don't think the model's going to change. If he is hoping for a bit of experience through the door, I think he's going to be disappointed.
It's me, Sam Matterface, alongside the Crookmeister, Alex Crook, and Dashboard Dean Ashton is here as well. Dean Ashton, hello, how are you?
I'm well, Sam, but I'm sure people can empathise with hitting a bit of a wall already during December. And I've been crooked already at the races, and I need a little recovery before Christmas.
Crook, what Christmas party number are we up to now? The Crook partyometer is up to...
Do you know what? I actually turned down an invite myself on Friday night. Our old colleagues in Portsmouth were organising their annual Pompey Hacks Christmas do, which, even though I don't really cover Pompey, I usually get along to, but I did sit that one out. So I think I'm still on 5, but it's number 6 tonight.
Okay, well, good news. I'm pleased that it's racking up quickly. I hope to get to double figures by the time we get to Christmas Eve next week. These are the 3 questions that I want answers to on this podcast today. Can someone tell me who Enzo Maresca's outburst helps? Is the Salah slot truce actually real? And do you sometimes have to cut your losses very quickly when you realise that you've appointed the wrong manager, or should you always have a little bit of patience? We'll talk about all of that on the podcast. First of all, 3-way title race now, Dino?
It's got to be the way Villa are charging at the moment, and I just think you can look at his squad. I think the experience now that they've got within that team and in that squad about what the manager wants, the levels that he's been able to get to as a manager previously, you have to put them up there. And I think if anyone kind of sleeps a bit on Aston Villa, could really get caught out. I've been so impressed with the way that they've played, but also the use of the players that he's got. And that's the big difference. Even when they've struggled in games, a couple of changes, he's able to shift the momentum in the game and get through those tricky moments. And that's what title winners do.
Well, Arsenal got through a few tricky moments, didn't they, this weekend? They required 2 own goals to get over the line against Wolverhampton Wanderers. At the bottom of the table, Wolves' performance might have inspired a little bit of confidence because they did play better, but there's no chance of them staying up. Burnley very quickly falling into that category, Crook.
Yeah, I think so. What is it? A club record 7 successive Premier League defeats now, and it wasn't a shock, was it, that they lost at home to a Fulham side who aren't particularly good travellers. They started the season okay, Burnley, but I think very quickly they're being found out in terms of a lack of quality. And I think I saw a stat that it's now 23 defeats from Scott Parker's last 29 Premier League games. So maybe there is a question about his credentials in the top flight as well.
Are you going in on Scott Parker again? Because what you did remember, if I remember rightly, you went in on Scott Parker at the beginning of the season, maybe even when he was at Bournemouth after he got fired. And then when he got promoted again and started to do okay, you were like, "Oh yeah, no, he's a nice guy. I spoke to him the other week. He's blah blah
He's a
blah."
nice
And
guy,
now
no
and now
question
he's
about
rubbish
that.
again. Is that what you're doing?
Listen, he's a lovely guy. That's got nothing to do with his ability to manage. I'm just pointing out that he doesn't win many games in the Premier League. He would probably push back and say, look, what resources have I really had to win games in the Premier League? I take that argument as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the same sort of argument for Daniel Farke as well, isn't it? He gets that labelled at him a lot, that his Premier League win ratio is really, really low in comparison to other managers. But then he's been promoted with Norwich and was thrown under a bus, never got the investment that he needed. And he's obviously brought Leeds into the Premier League, and slowly but surely they're starting to put points on the board. I actually thought they were the better team in the game against Brentford on Sunday afternoon. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, 4 in 4. It's pretty impressive from him. And actually, Crookie, because he loves to go from one narrative to the other, right? Okay. Has now got Daniel Farke to say that Dominic Calvert-Lewin should be playing for England. We'll discuss all of that in the next few minutes. But first of all, after we've done the title race, we're going to answer our big questions, those big questions that I asked just now. So stick with us because we've got a lot to get through over the next half an hour or so. Arsenal remain top, but the lead is just 2 points. They struggled to get over the line against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Then Manchester City, pretty much routine win away at Crystal Palace on Sunday when the three of us were doing Game Day Live. The big question around Arsenal is whether or not he is comfortable with the slender lead they've got going into the festive period. The way he was talking after the Aston Villa defeat, I thought was really impressive. The way he stayed very humble and very calm, didn't get overexcited about it. And when I spoke to him on Saturday night, Dean, he seemed in a similar sort of mood, which was, look, there is going to be tough moments over the course of this season. Our job is to ride those out. And bearing in mind the injury crisis, and let's be clear, really and truly, they've had an injury crisis over the course of the last month or so. The fact that they've emerged and still have a lead at the top of the table, is that impressive, or are you worried that they're struggling to beat those they should?
I think I'm a bit in between, because despite your injuries, you shouldn't struggle the way they did against Wolves. A team that other teams are breezing past and that have not shown particularly much fight in games. And that certainly would have to be a worry, because there was plenty of attacking talent available to Arteta. And I thought actually it wasn't about the result, it was about the manner of the way they played against Wolves would be the most important things, especially in attack. So that would worry me slightly, that you can, in Europe they've looked magnificent, but in the Premier League there's some sticking points there for sure. And I think they are going to have to overcome the mental challenge, which is the pressure of leading, which is the pressure of not winning the Premier League. For Mikel Arteta and his players, that's their biggest challenge. But I think he's absolutely right in that, that there are going to be some tough moments, and right now is tough because of the injuries, and they've just got to try and ride this out the best they can, and I think they're doing an okay job.
Jesus came back, made an impact. He didn't get the goal, but his movement did help the goal happen. I think that should be noticed. I mean, everyone will say, oh, well, he didn't get a touch on it. Yeah, but there's no way Maresca goes anywhere near that area unless he has to follow Jesus in there. It was a really intelligent run. He looked sharp, and he looked fit, and he looked ready to contribute. He's been criticised in the past for not scoring enough goals. An Arsenal supporting friend of the pod was at this game and graded the guy he replaced, Victor Gyökeres, his performance as 0 out of 10. Only 4 goals in the league this season, none of them against the top half team. What is going on with Victor Gyökeres, Crook?
Well, maybe we're seeing now why, when he left Coventry, Premier League clubs weren't queuing up to sign him. That's why he ended up at Sporting in the first place. I was never entirely convinced that Gyökeres would come in and be an absolute superstar in the Premier League as he was in Portugal, because we know they're 2 very different leagues. Exhibit A would be Darwin Núñez. And then you just look at his contribution when he isn't scoring goals, and it's minimal. I think he touched the ball 5 times in the first half, which was the fewest of any player on the pitch. Now, I guess if you're trying to defend Gyökeres and Dean Ashton is part of the Strikers Union, he's going to do that, and he'll say the service up to him wasn't good enough. But I think in the modern game, you can't really just be that sort of in the penalty area poacher. You need to almost create some of your own chances, and he doesn't seem to have that in his locker. And I think they looked a lot more threatening, even just for those 10 minutes when Gabriel Jesus was on. It was the same in Brugge in midweek. Jesus had a couple of opportunities that maybe he could have taken, but at least he was creating chances for himself. Gyökeres doesn't do that. So, yeah, I'm not convinced by him. I'm not convinced by Benjamin Šeško at Manchester United, although I'll acknowledge that he's had injury issues. And we spoke about this on Friday's show when we were on with Neil Warnock. I don't understand why Arsenal and United slept on Victor Osimhen. I think he looks better than both of those strikers.
Do you know what? It's really interesting, isn't it? Because there is obviously not a plethora of good number nines that are scoring goals all over Europe that teams can cherry pick. If that was the case, they wouldn't have been spending so much time filtering through the list and ending up with Gyökeres and Šeško. Let's be clear, Gyökeres is 27, nearly 28. He's been playing for a lot of his career in the lower leagues of English football. He's gone off to Sporting. He's done particularly well. He's come back now, and it hasn't exactly burst into life yet. Dean, the way you were talking, you were suggesting there that you're going to defend him. He is a big, burly striker. He is absolutely massive. He's got a lot of strength, and I thought he had a little bit more speed than he's actually got. He doesn't seem to have the pace to get away from anybody when it comes to running in behind. So why would you defend him? What is he not getting off the other players in the team that would make him better and his life easier?
The one thing I would say is, look around. There's not that many number nines doing well. Yes, Haaland is, okay? And he's well established now. And he's a once in a generational talent that we're talking about in Haaland. Not many are doing that well. It is difficult now. You are up there on your own. Nobody has got that much interest in making runs for you. You are making runs for them. You're making runs for the wingers to create space for your number 10, who's now the star in the team. So, and he's come from a team, and the same with Coventry, where not that many teams just sit really, really deep. He's come to the Premier League where every team wants to sit deep against Arsenal. It's the same for Isak. He's all of a sudden struggling because he's not used to playing in a team where there's no space, that the defence is tight and deep. And you're having to be patient. You know, we don't criticize Haaland anymore because he scores the goals. Haaland didn't barely touch the ball. It was his first attempt on goal and he scored. And at the end of the game, everyone would go, Haaland's been incredible. He's not been involved. He's the most patient forward I've ever seen in my whole life. It's incredible to watch, his patience. And that the others have got to be like that. At least I actually think Gyökeres does offer quite a bit out of when he's not scoring, because he will continue to run, he will continue to chase, he will continue to try and pull people around, which I think is what Arsenal do need. And he's just come back from an injury, by the way. We're not miracle workers. We can't just burst back in after an injury and be scoring hat-tricks every week. I just think as a number 9, everywhere, so many of them are struggling because of the way the game has gone.
So it's the style of play, the way the game has changed, where you play just with one striker, that has stopped the number 9 from being the headline maker. Apart from if you're Haaland and you're so ruthlessly efficient that you just basically touch the ball once or twice in a game and score 1 or 2 goals. I was looking around Europe, and I'm in the same sort of position as I suppose most scouts, trying to find number 9s that are doing really well. I never understood why no one took Lautaro Martinez, but actually I just don't think he wanted to come to the Premier League. Yeah. He scored a lot of goals, but I just don't think he wanted to come to the Premier League. And I wonder if the same is true with Victor Osimhen. He's ended up in Turkey. Sometimes these players, they do their research as well. They realise what Dean has already said here. This is a lot tougher than maybe some of the other leagues in the world. And they just think to themselves, hold on a second, I can have a much more fruitful, easier and more productive life if I'm playing in a league where I'm going to get more space, I'm going to get more goals. My brand is not going to be enhanced by going to Arsenal or to Manchester United. Šeško's a little bit different in the fact that he's 22 years of age and there's a little bit more headroom for him and some room to grow. Plus, He's had food poisoning, he's had injuries, he's been out. And actually, I've seen him play, and I think he's, especially after about 6 or 7 weeks in the team, I started to see those little touches, those little movements that started to cause opposition players a real problem. So I'm going to reserve judgment on him. And Gyökeres as well. I want him to do really well because he is a willing runner, isn't he? He's quite happy to sacrifice himself for the team. And Mikel Arteta obviously sees something in him. It's whether or not they can extract the goals that they are going to need from him going forward. Gabriel Jesus comes on, makes something happen immediately. That does highlight the fact that he hasn't scored since he come back from his injury. Right, okay, that's Arsenal. Aston Villa, third place, 3 points off Arsenal, 10 wins in 11 for them now. They're in particularly good form. And Unai Emery's team, not only grinding out results, but finding themselves behind quite often and still having the spirit to fight back, Crook.
Yeah, I mean, that was a stunning victory for Aston Villa because you were quite sweet on them. I wasn't so much because I saw them play in Europe in midweek. They made harder work of that Basel game than maybe they should have done. Admittedly, made 8 changes. But I just keep thinking with Villa, the squad isn't that deep. Obviously, the players they've signed in the summer, Harvey Elliott's not getting a look in. Jadon Sancho was really disappointing in midweek and doesn't start games in the Premier League. So they're pretty much reliant on the same players they had last season, barring the likes of Asensio and Rashford, who went back to their parent clubs. So at some point, I expect Villa to implode or to hit a wall, as Dean Ashton has this festive period. But fair play to them. There's no sign of that happening. And to come from behind twice and win it with a brilliant goal from Morgan Rogers, I think tells you all about their strength of character. Obviously, the next game for them is Manchester United at home. As a United fan, I'm already planning on watching that one from behind the sofa if possible, because they're the one team at the minute, probably them and City, and I'd actually put Villa ahead of City in this. You don't want to be playing at this moment in time because they just keep winning and they keep finding different ways to win.
Do you know what? It's really interesting because I think you've gone through the same process that I've gone through, which is I watched Aston Villa a lot in Europe. I did them a couple of times for the television. I've been deployed to Villa Park and other places with talkSPORT, and I'd seen a lot of them. They don't create that many chances. The tempo in games is quite slow occasionally, especially in those European games on a Thursday night. They're bad starters to matches. They concede odd goals when they shouldn't. And they rely a lot on high tariff, long range efforts, which get them out of jail every now and again. But they always come up with something to get them the 3 points. Now, what impresses me about this, Dean Ashton, is that I don't think now, having assessed them over a longer period of time, that they're even at their best yet. So when they do get into their stride and they start playing as well as I think they can, because I do think there's some really talented players there. By the way, Tielemans was a really big miss, and now he's back in the team. I think it just completely alters the whole picture, especially when he's playing higher up and playing those vertical passes. They're going to be a massive force. So I still think there's more to come from them.
I do as well. And Ollie Watkins, obviously, is back amongst the goals, but certainly not firing the way he has done and he can do. So that's another positive. And I wonder whether they might still do a little bit in January. I don't know what Crook thinks, but I just think, is there an opportunity like they did last season to maybe bring in, another striker on loan with a World Cup looming who wants to play and have European football that Aston Villa will have after Christmas. I just wonder whether there'll be a few reinforcements. But we're talking about the long range efforts, and you're right. You wonder when that'll eventually sort of dry up. But I actually think that is part of what they're trying to do. You talk about the slow build up, and it does. But as they get towards the second half of games, that ramps up in terms of the speed and the way they switch it. But it's all very small, and it gets a bit, draws the defence back, and then they've got the opportunity to strike. It's rare that you will score goals from distance if you are under severe pressure. So a lot of these goals are coming because they've created that space on the edge of the area. The player has time to get his head up and strike the ball properly, and they've got great technicians that can do it.
Yeah, and the way they strike the ball from the edge of the area is obviously something they've worked on, because if you looked at the way that the free kick that Rodgers scored came about the other week, they'd obviously been working on that knuckleball technique where it goes up and down really quickly. And if you look at his goal yesterday, the technique he uses to strike the ball means that there's so much wobble in the air that the goalkeeper finds it very difficult to read the flight of the ball. So by the time it's left his foot, and because he's hit it with power and it's moving all over the place, the goalkeeper can't react quick enough to deal with it. And then it's in the back of the net, and all of a sudden they've won the game. And West Ham once again find themselves on the back end of a bad result. Okay, let's talk about the other big questions then that I mentioned, right? Is the Salah slot truce real? Liverpool won the game against Brighton at the weekend. Ekitike, superb technique. I think he's a terrific footballer. But the big questions all around Mo Salah, who had to come off the bench when Joe Gomez was injured. At the end of the game, Salah, slot, everything's okay. We all love each other. Everything's fine, apart from the fact that Salah was crying walking around Anfield. Not that many people have mentioned that, but, that was going on as well. So what's happening? Is the Salah slot truce real? Crook?
Well, I certainly don't think we've heard the end of the story. I described it on Saturday as an uneasy truce. I think that is the case. I'm not convinced that Mo Salah has apologised to his manager for those comments. I don't believe that he's changed his opinion. I think he still feels harshly treated at the start of the season based on what he's done in the past. And I still sense that if Liverpool get a decent offer from Saudi in the January transfer window, then maybe they'll consider it. I think what they want is Mo Salah to tell them that he wants to leave and to present them with options, as opposed to them actively seeking to sell. Obviously, he's going to be out of sight, out of mind now, because he's off to play for Egypt to the African Cup of Nations. But is Mo Salah going to get the regular starts that he obviously wants when he gets back from that tournament? If Ekitike and Isak are fully fit, then I think the answer is probably no.
Dean?
I actually think that there has been a bit of a truce. I know he walked around a bit, kind of on his own around the pitch, and certainly clapped the supporters. There wasn't, for me, much discontent with his teammates. There was a lot of love there for Salah. There was a lot of love between him and the supporters that I think he really would have felt, because I'm sure he would have been turning up to Anfield thinking, having listened to what the supporters were like with Trent, whether he would get some similar treatment, and it was the opposite. It was almost like they went over the top to support him, and I'm just not sure where he is actually going to go, who's actually going to take him, and I wonder whether, I just think he'll come back and he'll have to fit back in, and it's not going to take much, is it, for him to get to a level where you're going to start him anyway because he's your best player.
It's the working back, isn't it? And he did a little bit of that, I think, on Saturday as well. Next question. Can someone tell me who Maresca's outburst at the weekend helps? Crook?
Probably nobody, but maybe Maresca in the eyes of the supporters, because judging by the reaction on social media, I think they see this as a manager frustrated with the owners and the model and the way the club is run. I think a lot of Chelsea fans, you included, have been saying that for some time. Even Scott Minto, who is more of a glasses half full than half empty man than you when it comes to Chelsea. He knows that they need some experience in there. He doesn't necessarily like the rotation policy, Maresca making so many changes, seemingly under pressure from the board to do so that all these expensive youngsters they've signed can add to their value. I think this is the first sign of Maresca getting a bit frustrated and pushing back. Long term, it's probably a fight that he can't win, but certainly short term, he's won the hearts of the Chelsea supporters because he's proving he's not a yes man.
Okay, so it's okay for me, for Scott Minto, for Olivier Bazaglo, for Joe Cole, for John Terry to say they need more experience. We all accept that is probably something that they're going to need if they want to win the league. But in reality, Enzo Maresca signed on the dotted line knowing the model of this football club. And he's an employee. He is the one who answers ultimately to the owners. The owners are the one who have set the agenda, rightly or wrongly. And we can disagree with them. We do. I agree that they need experienced hands. And I think all those people that I just mentioned, all Chelsea fans or ex-Chelsea players, all believe that they need experience. But we all know that the club agenda is not set in that manner. They want just younger players because they want resale value. And Enzo Maresca has been told that. He would have known that when he first went through the door. So why is he now bringing it up, Dean?
I've been thinking about it, and I just is there something else we're kind of missing out on? Why 48 hours? Why that specific timeline? What is it within those 48 hours that's either been said or not said to Enzo Maresca that's made him have this outburst? I think Crook's probably right in that it's a play to show the supporters who are frustrated too of his frustrations. But I just wonder, can it be something else? The timeline for me irks me a bit as to why he wants to talk about the last 48 hours and it being the worst of his time. That's quite a big statement to say that.
And also, there's two other things here. One, they've just managed to get a win for the first time in 3 games after some difficult performances. Cole Palmer is back and scoring goals. They've got over the line with another clean sheet, by the way, in a game where, let's be honest, Everton had some good opportunities, maybe not clear-cut chances, but had some good opportunities, especially before Chelsea got their second goal. And then the negativity comes after what is a positive. And I don't understand why you would do that. You're bringing the mood down when you really should be lifting it. They go to Cardiff Tuesday night. They've been playing the Carabao Cup quarter-final live on talkSPORT. Why would you want to do that? I don't understand it. Also, the PR play. Yeah, okay, I get it. It's a PR play. But this is a football club that didn't want him to start his own Instagram account because they don't want someone to be bigger than the club. They fell out with Pochettino because the supporters started to think that maybe Pochettino was the figurehead. They don't want that. Eghbali wants to be the one who is the superstar at this football club. He's running the joint. He's pulling the strings. They don't want a superstar manager, which is why they appointed Enzo Maresca in the first place. So if he's trying to win the hearts and minds of the Chelsea supporters, then that's going to fly in the face of the way that the club want to operate, isn't it, Crook?
Yes, and we saw it with Pochettino when he started pushing back, and I think in particular over the future of Conor Gallagher, he very quickly paid the price with his job, and I think Eghbali was the driving force behind that change of manager. So you're absolutely right. If Maresca has gone to war with him, then probably long term there's only going to be one winner.
Crook, could this be anything? Could this be anything to do with the January transfer window coming up?
Yeah,
and him
yeah,
him wanting a certain profile of player to push for the second half of the season.
Absolutely, because I think last summer he would have liked 1 or 2 more experienced players, particularly the heart of that defence, which I still think looks vulnerable. Everton had some good chances, as you've mentioned, the weekend. In fact, both Chelsea's goals came at a time when they were second best in the game, and then Everton had a couple of golden chances, particularly the Grealish one that he put across the face of goal in the second half. So yeah, this could be Enzo Maresca getting his ducks in a row ready for January, but I don't think the model's going to change. I think they're wedded to it, the Chelsea hierarchy. So I think, again, if he is hoping for a bit of experience through the door, I think he's going to be disappointed.
Okay, let's move on because Tottenham Hotspur had another brutal defeat away from home. Tottenham went to the City Ground on Sunday and put in what can only be described as, well, in fact, Dean Ashton was there. You describe it for us.
Pitiful is how I described it. It was. It's been a while since I've seen a team and a set of players look as disinterested in making any sort of fist in the game to get back into it, to try and rescue something, to even rescue some pride. There wasn't even a sign of that. Yes, Porro got himself turned around and shouted to his players about there being Olays in the stadium because Forest, yes, Nottingham Forest were getting Olays against you. And I was astonished in the end at the sort of attitude of the players. And Thomas Frank certainly looked on the sideline as if he was just boiling up, just arms folded, thinking, I can't quite believe the lack of anything that my side is showing.
So here's the next question. Do you sometimes have to cut your losses quickly when you realise that you've appointed the wrong manager or it just doesn't fit? Or should you always show patience and, in this circumstance, give Thomas Frank the opportunity to turn it around? Because the suggestion is that the players are not carrying out his instructions or are not working hard enough for him. Crook?
Well, I think you highlighted it a few weeks ago that your sense was the players weren't necessarily buying into what the manager wants to do. Obviously, we saw that publicly, if you like, with what happened with Van der Ven and Jed Spence when they refused to acknowledge him after coming off the pitch at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. They have cut their losses before, Spurs. They didn't take too long to decide that Nuno Espirito Santo wasn't the right man. Obviously, that was a Daniel Levy call, and he's not there anymore. My issue with Tottenham, Thomas Frank is a good coach. He's a good man, and he's a good coach. Has he got the tools to work with? I would argue not. That doesn't mean he's been perfect, and I think he has probably made too many changes of personnel and system over the course of the season. But when Daniel Levy was ousted, we were told by the Lewis family, who've now taken control of the football club and the day-to-day decision-making, that they wanted sporting success. Well, to get that, they're going to have to break the bank. They're going to have to do it in January and bring in some reinforcements, and they're certainly going to have to do it next summer as well. So let's see if they actually do want sporting success, or actually, as I suspect, if the reason they got rid of Daniel Levy was because they're trying to sell the football club. In terms of Thomas Frank, you could fire him. I'm not sure who's going to come in. They looked at Andoni Iraola in the summer. I've heard different versions there. Some people are telling me that he didn't want the job. Some people are telling me that he didn't interview particularly well. Oliver Glasner was mentioned by a couple of Tottenham fans on the phone in when I was driving home from Brentford last night. I think he would have his designs on a bigger job. I'm not sure it's that attractive because the squad's just not good enough. And the Tottenham fans are quite impatient for a group of supporters who saw their team finish 17th last season.
Yeah, well, you keep saying that about Tottenham fans, and I understand what you mean. And it does feel like that from the outside looking in. But if you're actually part of it and you're a Tottenham supporter, you have spent the best part of 20 years waiting for a trophy, and eventually you win one. And instead of building on it, you seem to sort of go backwards. You fire the manager.
Yeah.
You don't invest in the playing squad the way you would expect to. If you sort of listen to the Tottenham fans, they'll tell you that look at the squad, compare it to what we've had before. You know, every player is a downgrade on that 2019 team that got to the Champions League final. And if you're in a situation where your squad is weaker 5 years on from the team that was at your peak in the last sort of generation, then you're never going to get the chance to compete anyway. They've tried to do things on the cheap, and that has cost them, I think, in terms of the quality of player that they can pull in. Do you know, a chief executive of a football club told me once that you have to understand where you are in the food chain, right? And Tottenham Hotspur are not title contenders. You cannot get the best players in the world to come and play for you if you're Tottenham. And if you think you can, you're mistaken. You're going to miss out. So I remember, especially many times, we've seen so many rumours about Tottenham being linked with big money stars from the continent, and it just never materialises. They always just miss out. And the suggestion from this guy was, actually, it's because they're going for the wrong players. What they need to do is go for a superstar who is coming through the ranks, someone who is like a Virgil van Dijk when he was at Southampton or a Virgil van Dijk when he was at Celtic. Take that player and say to them, give me 3 years, we'll make you into a superstar, and then we'll sell you to Real Madrid. But Tottenham are so difficult to buy off that people don't want to go there because you don't end up being sold in a simple manner. It's a massive fight to get out. See Carrick, see Berbatov, see Modric, see Bale, see Kane. It's difficult to leave. So the idea is if you're a promising player who needs to move up a step in order to go to the very top of the game, you're not going to go to Tottenham on your way up because Tottenham make it difficult for you to leave after a couple of good years and you've given them good service. Whereas what Tottenham probably should do at this part in their development is they need to allow those players to come in, promise that they will sell them for big money if the offer is right going forward. Then they get the benefit of that experience and it elevates them going forward. Instead, they're shopping around Europe trying to find teenagers that will take 20 grand a week so that they can, bolster their squad and just about get into Europe every single year. In the end, that's going to fail, isn't it, Dean?
I think that's just a brilliant way of putting it for Tottenham, Sam. I've got to say, I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, because that team the 2009 was a team full of players you've just talked about, players that are on the rise, and because they find it so difficult to get players in, and because the wages they're willing to pay just isn't up there with the top players and the top clubs. So that alone, speaking from experience as an ex-player, that does have an effect. We care about money, so that will make our minds. Even if you thought Tottenham was the best place for you, players will have their heads turned because the money's better somewhere else. And I just think for the Tottenham fans, what they're disappointed about is that they got to that level and it felt as if here's our opportunity to maintain and push and be part of that big group, and they've sort of really fallen away. So they've got the glitz and glamour of the most incredible stadium. Yeah, I wonder how many would actually swap it back to White Hart Lane, but have that team and that experience and that level of football. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with them. They've got a big couple of weeks. Sunderland beat Newcastle by 1-0 in the Weir Weir derby. The dream season continues. Absolutely terrific. Their recruitment policy is absolutely right, isn't it?
Spot on. Obviously, they've got the AFCON issue where I think they lose half a dozen players, but they've already got more than enough points on the board to achieve their main objective, which is to stay in the Premier League. But in many ways, I think this is as much about Newcastle as it is about Sunderland. I know a lot of Newcastle fans were very disappointed with how timid they were. I think Eddie Howe said he was embarrassed after the game. They didn't really lay a glove on their arch rivals, and they didn't look like they wanted it enough for the first North East derby in 9 years, which I think is really alarming. And this run of away form continues. And people like Craig Hope and Luke Edwards, two of the North East correspondents writing for the national papers, they both use the same word. They both said Newcastle have been bullied. And that would be a big cause for concern for Eddie Howe, because at the very least, you would expect them to be competitive in such a huge game.
Yes, and I don't know if it's down to the fact that they're playing in the Champions League in midweek and they had to expend a lot of energy in the game against Leverkusen, which they did. But one of the things that I've noticed about them in recent matches, Dean, is when they get themselves in good positions, they can't control matches anymore. The pressing has sort of come off a little bit, off the bridle a little bit. I don't know if that's an energy thing and a fatigue thing. But also they lose the ball a lot. They give the ball away. There's lots of turnovers whenever Newcastle are involved. And the chaos, I think, when they're at home, that brings helps them, because they feed off the crowd and it all sort of becomes a bit stretched, and they've got the speed in behind to be able to deal with the counterattacks. But when they're away from home and actually the noise is working against them rather than for them, sometimes they capitulate and they give away leads or they give away late goals, and that's cost them deal. Now, this wasn't a late goal. This was an inexplicable home goal from a forward who just headed the ball in the wrong direction. We've all done that. But it is a damaging defeat, this.
Yeah, and it's magnified, of course, because of the nature of the game, the derby that it is. Because Eddie Howe was right. There was nothing really in the game. There wasn't much quality in front of goal. There was very much just a battle in the middle of the pitch for most of the game, and so easily could have gone either way, and certainly should have been a draw. But it highlights their away form, and that's the issue. And look, I'm stealing this off somebody from yesterday, and I apologise, I can't remember who said it, but about the players kind of hiding away from St James's Park, and I think that has some weight to it, because at St James's Park, if you've been there, it's the most incredible atmosphere. The players get drawn in. You cannot hide there. They'll be on you, and you have to perform for them. And suddenly you go away from home, you don't have that. And as you talked about the control, that's where you really need players to stand up and take control of the game away from home when it's more difficult. The contrast is just so big that there has to be something more of a mental issue than there is a technical issue if you can do it at one stadium and not any of the others.
Okay, let's round up the podcast by talking about the bottom of the table and the hottest striker in the Premier League. Yeah, that's right. The hottest striker in the Premier League. 3 goals in 7 for Erling Haaland. but 4 in 4 for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And he's got 5 for the season, which is more than Victor Gyökeres, Alexander Isak, João Pedro, and Benjamin Šeško. Sometimes, folks, if you're looking for that big number 9, he's on your doorstep and he's available on a free transfer, Crook.
Yeah, and I think people scoffed actually when Manchester United were linked with Dominic Calvert-Lewin in the summer. But you look at how Šeško is struggling in the short term. You ask, would Dominic Calvert-Lewin be a better bet? You've got Jamie Vardy, by the way, who's just been named Player of the Month over in Italy as well at the veteran stage of his career. Another who was available on a free transfer. I thought the goal that he scored, and Dean will love it, was absolutely superb. The cross was brilliant, but the way he hung in the air, and then the neck muscles, the strength he's got to guide it into the opposite corner beyond the keeper, I think was a thing of beauty. And you've alluded to it already. They were good value leads for at least a point. They certainly didn't deserve to lose that game. And he's given them a chance, isn't he? What he's got West Ham looking a bit nervous because realistically, I think they're the only team that Leeds can really reel in now, down at the bottom of the table. In fact, West Ham are below Leeds. I
was going to say, it's the other way around, isn't it? West Ham have got to try and reel in Leeds.
Yeah, and if he stays fit, he will get into double figures, won't he? There's no question about that. He'll probably go beyond double figures, and that might just make the difference. I think Daniel Farke, touting him for England, probably is too fanciful. But
it was your idea.
They do need an understudy for Harry Kane. But what I would say about Daniel Farke, since he made that tactical tweak, I think at half-time in the Man City game, going to a back 3, they've not looked back, Leeds, have they? Very nearly stole a point at the Etihad, beat Chelsea, got a draw against Liverpool, and not many teams go to Brentford and avoid defeat. So they're in a good place right now. And Keith Andrews said to me afterwards, I'd rather have played Leeds 3 weeks ago than now. And that tells you how well Daniel Farke has done under extreme pressure, because make no bones about it, if they'd lost those 2 games to Chelsea and to Liverpool, I think we would be talking about a different Leeds manager on the touchline yesterday.
I think they've done really well. I think he's done really well, and I'm pleased that they've managed to just sort of make themselves super competitive, so that they've got a chance of staying in the league. I don't know if they'll manage it. I hope they do, because it's a brilliant place to go. Now, if you go back years and years ago and look through the Game Day podcast. So Crook and I have been doing this, I think, now for 6, nearly 7 years, right? So it was the Game Day podcast. It's now Premier League All Access. Even before that, we did another podcast together. But if you look back, there is an episode that is titled "I Love Dominic Calvert-Lewin," and it's because when he was at Everton under Carlo Ancelotti, I think, was that right? He was scoring goals for fun, and I just loved his energy. I love the way he leaps. I love the enthusiasm he's got. He's gone through a terrible period of injury. And Dean, you will be able to empathise with that, because when your body doesn't allow you to do what you know technically you want to do, and mentally you can do if your body allows you, what it is that you need to do, but your body just stopping you from doing it, it's super, super frustrating. I think it's fanciful to suggest that he might go to the World Cup with England at the moment, but I think that just tells you and underscores what we were saying earlier about the lack of number 9s that are available to Premier League team. But he is a very, very good player when he is in top form, and he doesn't mind missing chances.
I think he does mind, and he should mind, but I think he keeps getting in there, which is your point. And there's a certain mentality about that, in that there are players that once they start missing chances, they will hide. They'll stop getting into the areas where the chances are, because they think they need to be more involved. He is a player that at times you watch and think, how is this guy a Premier League striker on X amount a week? You do. And leading up to this run of form, I'd watched him 3 or 4 times and gone, just put me a kit on. I honestly could be more of a threat at the moment than Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But he keeps going. He's got a great mentality, and he has got attributes that can make him a top striker, as he showed at Everton under Ancelotti when they played a specific way to get the best out of him. And that header is a player that's confident, that's fit, that can trust his body, which is so important, like you said, when you've had your injuries. And I mean, Crook's right. It was magnificent. The leap, the way he hung in the air, he's obviously got that ability, and the header was absolutely superb. But that's a player that's suddenly confident, getting the best out of himself, I hope for him and Leeds they can continue, because he fluctuates so badly at times with his form.
Yes, and I saw him against West Ham United, and he took 3 touches where 1 would do, and that is a sign of a player who isn't confident. He also lost a couple of aerial duels, which he never does, right? Because he's brilliant in the air. He's super brilliant at springing into the air and getting higher than everybody else and flicking on or bringing the ball down, whatever. That is one of his major attributes, which is why he's so good at hanging in the air when the cross comes in. He's got so much. I just want it to work for him. He's just at an age now where this is probably his last chance to have a really good Premier League season, couple of seasons. Do you know what I mean? He's at that age where he's north of 25. It's his do or die now. Go on, have a good career. I hope it works for him, because he's a nice lad as well. He, that he wants to do it. He wants to work hard. He lives right off the field. The injuries are to do with just genetics, really. It's just the way it is. They've worked on everything to try and make him feel better. They changed his car seat. They changed his bed. They've changed everything to try and get him working biomechanically, and hopefully now that is working for him.
Have they sent him out with Crook for a few weeks? See if that makes a difference or not.
That might build up his immune system.
I was going to say, they try to stress test him. Let's break you down and build you back up again. It's what they do to spies before they go off on deployment. Just spend a couple of weeks with Crook. He'll take you racing to one of his several Christmas parties that seem to start in October and go on till February. And then the birthday celebrations start straight afterwards for August in March. West Ham. I'm worried about West Ham. Dean, they don't have enough quality, do they? And even when they're scoring goals, they can't keep it out of their own net.
Yeah, I'm extremely worried because I think it's Manchester City, isn't it, up next for West Ham? Leeds are picking up points, and if that gap does start to open up, you're in serious trouble to pull it back in, because of the stress that you have as a club, as players, every day going in. It's amazing how different it feels when you're under that dotted line every day, how it affects the mood, the training, the little chats between players, how that can build up when you're in this type of pressurized situation. And I saw a tweet yesterday from, I think it was Jack Mate, I think, and a big West Ham fan, saying Dawson, Ogbonna, Cresswell, Sofal, I miss you guys. But so his point is, and I get it, players that are going to dig in, that are going to, block, head, defend properly, understand what it means to play for West Ham, understand that you're in a relegation battle. And I looked around, their last few games, I just don't see many, if any. I do think Bowen is giving absolutely everything, trying to lead by example with the pressure of being the captain. But where's the other characters that are going to get you out of this? You are in a relegation battle.
If your central defensive pairing is Mavropanos and Jean-Claire Todibo, I think you are probably in a situation where you are going to lack a bit of that. And that's no disrespect to those two players. That Mavropanos played against England at Wembley a year and a bit ago, and he was absolutely terrific. He was fantastic. Todibo was declined by Newcastle because they weren't 100% sure about him. Martin O'Neill sat in the studio with me, and he knows more about football than I do. And he said Jean-Claire Todibo hasn't got a defensive bone in his body, which if you're scrapping at the bottom of the table, that would worry me. Areola comes up with some brilliant saves every now and again, but then will make a huge mistake, which costs them dear. With all due respect, Matthias Fernandes, brilliant going forward. Is he the player that you want in the middle of the park when you're digging in against relegation? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It depends. He's one of those up and down players. Look, they've got a lot of players who have not been in a relegation fight before. They've got a lot of players who I think probably are experiencing the atmosphere of West Ham before. And I'm talking about Maresca, even Potts. I mean, he's been around the club for a long time, but he's playing now in the first team for the first real spell. Diouf's just come in. It's going to be a difficult couple of weeks, especially with the fixtures they've got coming up. Manchester United play tonight live on talkSPORT. Obviously, you might be listening to this podcast and they've already won or lost. So Crookie, because he's very good at this, he tells us what is going to happen. So we don't have to do a podcast after the Manchester United game because he already knows, right? Because he is Cryptic Crook.
It's going to be a nervy home win for Manchester United. I think Bournemouth will suit United. They're not going to come there and sit deep and try and hit on the counter. They'll impose themselves, and that might just enable United to get some joy. But again, it's never easy. When was the last time you watched United win easily? Doesn't happen.
Monday night.
You're going to... Well, yeah. But 1-1 at half-time, by the way. They still let Wolves back in.
Crook doesn't remember it, though, because he'd been out with Dean Ashton and Scott Minto racing, and he didn't even know who the goal scorers was the next morning. He had to look it up, and then he came on the podcast to talk about it and still couldn't remember.
I forgot poor old Mason Mount, your mate, didn't I?
It was the best player on the pitch, by the way, in the game. Right, gentlemen, thank you very much. Crook, enjoy your Christmas party tonight. I'll be at Manchester United. Dino, you get some rest. Just in case we manage to fashion a podcast night out before Christmas, which I don't think we'll manage to do, but we'll give it a go. Crookie will definitely give it a go. I think he's got his eyes on Sunday night after the Game Day live show. That's it from us. We'll be back on Thursday to preview the whole of the weekend. The Carabao Cup quarterfinals are live on talkSPORT this week. Chelsea against Cardiff, Newcastle against Fulham, and Manchester City against Brentford. The other quarterfinal is the following week, and then there's loads of Premier League football over the weekend. And remember, Christmas is coming, and that means an absolute plethora of live football on talkSPORT. Download the app. You get only the best content. You get the podcast that we do here, but you also get the live shows. You can watch the live shows and all of the live games as well. It's talkSPORT. You know it makes sense.